Meet Brendan Hines-Ike. Born from Colorado, Brendan grew up playing for Chivas USA, then went pro in multiple European countries, and recently just signed with Austin FC. But how did Brendan stand out and find success? And so in this conversation, you'll learn the difference between Division 1 to the professional level, uncover the skills for a top-tier defender, and hear how he overcame 2 career-ending injuries throughout his time. What was life like growing up for you?
We were a soccer family. My dad was a track runner in college, but he loved soccer more. I grew up watching my brother play, spent every single weekend doing tournaments, 5v5, 3v3. My dad coached both of us. We never were really into the concept of paying to play because $3,000-$4,000 a season just wasn't possible for us. My dad got in contact with a club called Chivas Denver, mostly made up of immigrants from Mexico. We didn't speak a word of Spanish. We had to figure it out from 9-10 years old. That was the best development we could have ever asked for because those kids were as good as it came to street soccer, the finesse of the game. Then my brother got a couple opportunities to go to Mexico, to Chivas Guadalajara. He could not sign because Chivas has a rule you have to be Mexican to play for their club. They ended up just starting Chivas USA, which used to be an old MLS club. My brother was playing with the 18s, I was playing with the 16s. He was one of the first players to go overseas to Nottingham Forest and Valencia when he was 9 years old, but he never ended up staying over there because they only could do one-year deals.
Was it difficult to balance school and soccer with traveling and obviously the competition?
The Chivas USA was such a big talent pool compared to Colorado. Unfortunately, the first team was really bad. They had no infrastructure, there was no chemistry, the club was completely discombobulated, but the academy stayed the same and the academy grew and became better and better. My first 6 months was really tough. I went to 4 high schools in 4 years. I did online school, I transferred twice. It was just trying to find a place where I could get schooling in and games. I found a way to make it all work.
I know you went to Creighton University, also the University of South Florida. Why did you go to university, and how does college soccer, especially in the Big East, compare to like overseas competition?
Well, I didn't want to go to college. That was the thing. My brother had the chance to sign with the first team. He saw how misrepresented the first team was, and there was no real path. He was seeing players sacrifice that college opportunity. Chivas USA was going bankrupt. There was a big possibility that if I signed my deal, there would be no club anymore. I remember playing against the LA Galaxy late in the recruiting year. This guy walked up to me after the game. He was the assistant coach of Creighton at the time, and he basically said, "Look, I got one more full scholarship left. We'd love to give it to you. Would you consider coming to Creighton University?" And I was like, I think I decided within like 3 days because I needed to know. I'm not going to forfeit my college education for a club that was going to probably fold within the year. And lo and behold, it did. When I first went into Creighton, my first year, we played in the Missouri Valley. We pretty much ran that conference, won the Missouri Valley, and we ended up going all the way to the semifinal of the College Cup my first year. The second year was the transition to the Big East. It was a tougher year. Funny enough, we ended up losing to Seattle University, who my brother was playing for. The game was a complete whiteout blizzard. Couldn't see the ball at all, even with it being orange. There was about 4 people in the stands, and 2 of them were my parents. And we ended up losing to them, I think 2-1. Then I had a fallout with the coach. It started in the summer. I had wanted to go to Europe. I had opportunities in Scandinavia. The big fear was that if I went over there, I wouldn't come back. It didn't allow me to go, so that's why I made my final year to South Florida. I don't know how the competition is now with college. Back then, a lot of MLS teams took players from college. Compared to Europe, the level was significantly higher over there because of how good those players are at such a young age already. I'd say physically, United States was better, but technique, the tactical side of the game, how quick your brain has to work, I was having to really improve to get up to speed.
What was the reality of moving to Europe for the first time at 19 years old?
I was prepared for it because I'd already made a ton of moves, was used to not being next to my family. When I went to South Florida, it was such a delight because the weather was amazing, great place to live. When I landed in Stockholm on January 1st, it was really, really tough because it was freezing cold. There's 3 hours of daylight during the day in the winter. So there's a massive depression era that happens during those couple months because there's no sunlight. So when I arrived there, it was like probably minus 10 degrees. We would train at 11 o'clock in the morning, but the sun didn't come up till about 10. So when we arrived, it was dark. We'd train for the 2 hours that we could. By the time you went in, showered, did your weights, and went home by 3 o'clock, it was dark. And that was like my first 3.5 months, so along with transitioning to the language, the culture, everything. After 5-6 months, I started speaking the language. After 7-8 months, I started playing pretty much every game, and it kind of became a country that I fell in love with. It was lonely.
How was your time at the first club, OSK, at the football?
I had been at the club 6 months before to train. When I had come to Europe, I ended up going to Norway with Stabæk, where Bob Bradley was at the time. I trained with him for a couple weeks. I trained with Valerenga for a couple weeks, and then I was getting ready to head home. And my agent said, "Look, there's a team in Sweden who wants to see you." I didn't have any money, but I was like, if they can put me up and they can give me food, I'll come train with them for 2 weeks. So OSK, Örebro, they brought me in, and I was immediately in touch with the feelings of the club, how the manager wanted to do things. This was totally different. By the end of the trip, trip, I had 3 or 4 guys come up to me and like, all right, what are you doing? Are you going to sign with us? Are you going to stay? And I'm like, I got to go back and play in college. I got one more season. I had basically made a deal with Örebro before I even finished my college season. The first day I arrived, we trained. It was minus 20 Celsius. The field was like frozen solid. And there was guys out there training in shorts, these typical Swedes. But the first week, the captain of the club, he was notoriously sort of a bully for younger guys. He meant it all with love once you got to know him. He purposely called me by the wrong name for like 3 training sessions in a row. I was fed up with it. I was like, I don't care if I'm one of the younger guys. He was like, okay, it took you long enough to finally realize you have to stand up for yourself.
And then after that, you moved to Belgium. Was that a big step in your career? Did you feel more confident?
When I found out with Holland, they only have a certain amount of international spots they can fill. It was going to be really tough for them to use an international spot on a central defender. It kind of fell to Belgium. The club had only done a few transfers. But anyway, they ended up coming to a record transfer on both ends. It was a really, really big transition. I mean, shockingly. There was no family aspect. The first day, I didn't even train. The coach basically told me, we need you to play tomorrow. So I was like, yeah, I'm fit. I'm ready to go. Well, we played against Anderlecht, the biggest club in Belgium, who was a Champions League contender. And I played it right back, and we ended up getting smashed 4-1. But I played the whole game. I won player of the match for our team, which, I mean, if you lose 4-1, there's not really a player of the match. Then the next 13 games were a whirlwind because I played right back. Every game was so physically taxing. I didn't speak with anybody. There was not a lot of people who were my friends. I was alone. I had to figure everything out on my own. And a big changing point was after the 13th game. The 14th game, we were winning 2-0. It was a really weird game. All of a sudden, 31 minutes goes up, and my number is set to be substituted out. I was like, whoa, what's going on here? The coach didn't say a word to me. And then I didn't end up playing for the next 3 or 4 games. Then he just kind of came up and tapped me on the shoulder, and he goes, have you learned your lesson? I go, I'm not sure what my lesson is. Nobody's told me anything. He goes, I don't want you getting too comfortable here. So you'll start tomorrow. Europe being Europe, he was fired. New coach comes in, and now you have a whole new system, whole new process. We had brought in 17 new players. I was one of 2 guys left, which is what took me to DC.
What was it like to play in the MLS? Was it like a dream to you, considering you grew up in America?
I definitely wouldn't say it was a dream, because my dream was always to stay in Europe. The only reason I really came back was because the coach who became the coach of DC was at the time a coach in Belgium, and he called me. So I was his first signing. It was very different because I didn't have much of a life outside of soccer when I was living in Europe. You basically just train and you eat at home and you go to sleep and you do it again. In America, there's so many other things. I have my family, friends, I have other opportunities. That was the first time I could really get a feel for having a nice life off the field. And at the same time, my wife was pregnant. When I arrived at the club was not in great state, but with the new coach, he brought a system that was extremely effective. Fast forward to mid-July, we just won 4 in a row. We had beaten Toronto 7-1. I had a weird moment in the game and found out I broke my hip. It was a huge back break for me because that meant I had to miss the remainder of the season. But there was a lot of excitement. I still to this day don't know what happened in that offseason, but after 6 games, they fired the coach, and that kind of led to the beginning of the turmoil. We had an interim coach, and then they brought in Wayne Rooney, but the ship was already sunken. We ended up taking last place in the league, and the worst part was I fractured my foot. That left me out for 10 months. At that point, the club had changed again. It was basically unrecognizable from the last time I played.
You guys finished in the bottom of the season. You scored an own goal versus the Revs, but on the high, I saw you scored your debut. When you look at highs and lows overall, how does that impact you?
Own goals are part of the game, just like goals are. It doesn't affect me at all because at least you were trying. The hardest thing was figuring out who you are in a group. When you have constant change in your work environment, it's very hard to know then where you stand. So that was a hard thing to always have to adapt to. I mean, the highs for me were coming back from 2 career-ending injuries. The hip injury, I was told by 11 or 12 surgeons, you have to have surgery or you can't play. One surgeon said, look, you don't need the surgery, you can come back from it, but it's going to be really, really hard. And I said, oh, I'm going to take that route and see. I came back from it. So those were big highs for me mentally.
How do injuries impact you in your career? And also, how can professionals outside, whether it's a physical therapist, an athletic trainer, improve quality in the health and the performance of athletes?
I wouldn't even have to say it has to do with taking care of your body because sometimes freak things happen. But they are a reminder that things can be taken away really quickly, especially when you're in a really good moment. I've always been a big believer that those things happen for a reason. It's always great to have a story about a player who gets injured and comes back and you see how it propels his career into the next stages. Unfortunately, sometimes you have those ones that are so bad that they have to stop, but I think then they still go on to have a much better fortitude and mental toughness throughout the rest of their life. In terms of the physicians and the trainers and everything like that, their job is to help you and to keep you as positive as possible. But at the end of the day, it's only you that's got to go through it. You got to do it yourself. And it's hard. There was 3 or 4 or 5 months where I was constantly like, I'm never going to be able to do this. But you keep going. Eventually you look back and it's like, man, that was crazy. There's a lot of life lessons to be learned from. Rehab is a very individual battle within yourself.
Out of all the games that you've played in your entire career, is there there one that stands out in particular?
All three of my debuts that I made for my clubs were really good. I remember I made my debut in Sweden, my first professional game. I came in and I played left back, and the first pass that I made was like a 60-yard pass to our right winger who went in and scored, but he was offside. The Kortrijk game, we had lost 4-1, but I had one man of the match, like I said, at playing at right back against the Giants and Anderlecht of Belgium. And then with DC, I had the opening game where I scored. That was a really cool start to my DC journey. So all my debuts have always been really eventful and positive.
What would you say are the 3 skills or 3 non-negotiables defenders need to have?
Reading the game, that's everything. You got to be able to read the game. You got to be able to think quicker than your opponent, see things happening before they happen. Communication, you got to be able to communicate. Your job is primarily talking to everybody else in front of you. Every great central defender I've ever talked with said if you are doing nothing in the game, you're doing the right thing. You should basically have everybody else doing everything for you. If you have to do something, then it means that it's broken down and now you have to do your job. And I would say the last thing, I think you have to be able to influence the game offensively. I think from a passing standpoint or from a set piece standpoint or something. I think nowadays defenders are not just defenders anymore. You have to be able to influence the game. And then I think you have to have a very steady mindset, because I think there's so much that goes along with the game in terms of emotions. You got to kind of be the steady rock of the team, because otherwise, if you start going off the rails, it affects the rest of the team. And I've definitely been caught in those situations before where my mood has then quickly changed the mood of the team.
And what would you say is like your last piece of advice if you're someone looking to go pro?
Never stop loving the game, because it's a business and it becomes a lot about contracts, money, the wins, the losses, all those things. But if you don't enjoy it, it's not fun. Even if you think being a professional athlete is the best job in the world, it's a hard job. If you don't win this game, you're probably not going to have your contract put up again, and then you got to fight for new work and for your family and stuff. So just keep loving the game.
A massive thanks to Brendan, as I wish you the best in your football career. And please drop a like on the video, because if it wasn't for him, this video wouldn't be possible. But if you want to see more, check this interview out.